I have this image of meeting you the very first time you worked for Sark.
I did.
And I don't know why I was in the office. I don't remember that part, but I just remember just thinking you were the most delightful human.
Oh,
And it's no wonder, pun intended,
good
that
job. I see that. I noticed that.
that you went on to write this just a
Mm.
wonderful, luscious book, Wonder Seeker, 52 Ways to Wake Up Your Creativity and Find Your Joy. So I want to know, this book's been out for a few months now. What role is wonder playing in your creative life these days?
Mm.
Because we know as creatives, right? We have a message and we craft
Yeah.
it, but it's something, it takes on a life of its own for other people, but then how does it still live for you?
Yeah, I think at the moment the way it's living for me is one of the practices that I share in the book, which is about wonder spotting, which is really like a practice of cataloging, like, okay, like I'm putting on my wonder goggles, I'm going outside, even if it's just a lap around the block so I can move my body after being on Zoom for so many hours. And I'm putting on my wonder goggles. And that means I'm asking myself this question: what is beautiful or interesting in my environment right now? Simple question. It orients you, it orients your attention, it drops you into the moment. It's mindfulness, it's movement, it's beauty seeking, it's creative, it's all the things that I love most in one little practice. And I think that practice alone of cataloging these small pleasures, these small bits of beauty, orients me toward what is still good in the world. Because if you watch the news, it's everything is terrible. And it really is. It's really a mess. And so it can feel like the world is falling apart. It can feel like we are falling apart. It can feel like there is no hope. We can go into collapse. And I think that to stay buoyant and to stay resilient, we need to be tracking for what is also good. And that's how I do it. I wonder for you, like, I imagine you have similar practices. You live in a beautiful place. You're a very active person. Yeah. How do you keep yourself buoyant and feel positive and feel like the world is still a good place to live in?
I like to go for wonder walks too and look for something I haven't noticed before, especially since I walk the dogs on almost the exact same route.
Yeah.
And so, what haven't I noticed before? What haven't I seen? What's new? Because I have a real tendency to put myself in a box, and a box of efficiency and get stuff done.
Right.
And one of the things I try to orient towards is, this is my life.
Yeah.
This is my life, and I don't want to be rushing through it. I just ran a half marathon a couple days ago, and I
Wow.
was
Oh my
like,
God. Wait, hold on. Holy shit. That's amazing. Congratulations. Okay.
thank you. And I just had my personal PR for a half marathon, and but I didn't sleep for a few. I have been having trouble sleeping, which comes, it seems to come with the moon.
Yeah.
And so I didn't sleep the few nights before. And so I woke up being like, I just got to get through this. I just got to get through this. And I stopped. I said, I don't want to get through it. This is my life. And
Yeah.
it was in Moab. It's this extraordinarily beautiful
Mm.
route by the Colorado River. And I'm like, I want to be present for it, even if it's painful,
Yeah.
even if I poop my
Mm.
pants, I want to be
Mm.
present for it.
I love what you just said. Like, I want to be there for it, even if it's painful.
And that's
'Cause
hard.
yeah, because I think that's parenthood.
That's
That's
everything.
that's caring for elders, right?
Yeah.
That's everything. That's life. I want to be there. And it also speaks to something that is so important to me, which is like, what what range of things are we allowing ourselves to feel? Right. So like one of the things that I talk about in my book and that is just important to me is like, it's that Brene Brown thing of like, if we're numbing our pain, then we're also numbing our joy. And so
Mhm.
it's like, if there's two ends of the spectrum, right? And like the spectrum of feeling, it's like, okay, then what we're doing is we're just narrowing what we're willing to feel in a life. And so I want to like widen that range, and I want to feel all of it. I want to feel all the joy, which means that I also have to feel the yucky stuff. Yeah.
And what role has wonder played, if at all, in this pandemic
Mhm.
flatness? That's what I'm feeling. I feel
Yeah.
like there's been this flattening, and even now, where we're going out more and we're doing more things. We went on this road trip to run this race, and we've eaten in restaurants and things that we've been really careful not to do. But I feel like there's just this insipid flatness that I'm almost like, I'm trying to break it up like you would break up ice, or, and I find that I'm going towards, it's hard. Like, I just want to stay with the comfortable rut that we've been in.
Yeah.
Are you finding anything from the book or any of your practices or helping with that, or is it just going to take time?
It's a great question. And I think Adam Grant is the one who's talking. He wrote an essay for the Atlantic or something about like languishing and the meh that we're all feeling, right?
The New York Times, yeah.
Or the New York Times, yeah. And I think, during 2020, I was writing the book. I got the book deal during 2020, and I was actually writing the book that summer. And the book really, me protecting the energy of the book. So I needed to write a book that was a little beacon of hope for the world. And it was a bright light. And so I needed to protect the energy of the book and keep the vibration really high, even inside of a world that was very scary and we were all really anxious. And so the practice of orienting toward goodness and joy was very much like a very concentrated practice when I was writing the book. And it had a huge positive effect. I think I had one of the best years of my life that year, which sounds outrageous, even though there was loss, there was all the things that, we were all experiencing. So that was proof to me that there is something to the micro practice of scanning for what's also here, which I was just describing. So there's that. But I feel you, like, now that we are emerging again, I think the pace of the pandemic actually matched my natural pace pretty nicely. I'm not someone who loves to go out a lot or go out at night or do so there was something that felt like, oh, good. I'm not there was no FOMO. I wasn't missing out on anything. So yeah, but I think what you're asking is where's our aliveness? What are we reaching for now? Like that maybe. And so I think that kind of connects, this is a nice maybe segue into a why bother conversation, right? Because I noticed that as I get older, my ambition wanes. I'm noticing that now that this big dream of a book has come true for me, I'm like, oh, what are my dreams now? I don't know that I dreamed beyond that book. That was my big dream for so many years. So I guess I want to turn it back to you and say, what do you know about why bother when life is falling apart, or it seems like it? What comes up for you?
Two things. One, the fallow time after a project. It's really...
Oh, good point. Yeah.
It's really hard because our culture doesn't celebrate that. We don't run into each other in the grocery store and say, what are you up to these days? What are you making? And well, I'm in the fallow time, and we just, oh, yay, I'm so glad for you, right? I mean, maybe in Berkeley, but
in Berkeley you can spin it in a nice way. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that is related to why bother, because what I discovered when I was writing the book, Why Bother? Discover the desire for what's next, is that we don't want to be in that liminal space.
Right.
Our brains aren't built for it. Our culture's not built for it. We're built to know certainty, to want certainty, and to move ahead. And what happens when we're in a why bother time, whether it's just around our work or our relationships or our whole life, is we don't want to hang out in that liminal space and actually find, experience, savor just the desire for the perfect croissant, the desire to just go out and take pictures again. You're a photographer. You've done some of my photographs that I love those. And to find the desire to experience wonder without having to produce something. And I think that's where I short circuit myself. And I will say I'm doing better at it, but it's a real practice to use that word, a theme of the conversation. So I've gotten better at allowing myself to be in that liminal space and not be creating something that's going to be clear or have certainty or get me anything, and really just and I'm in this too with you, I'm right here with you, even though my book's been out for 2 years almost, is cultivating that desire, just desire itself, just pleasure itself, just wonder itself, and not having it need to mean anything, not having it need to go anywhere. And that's the piece that I keep having to work. And I think out of that, naturally, so curiosities will arise. And maybe it'll be for another book, maybe it'll be another for one of your online courses, maybe for a retreat that you do, or maybe for your own paintings that you make. But it's there. I really believe it's there, but it just needs its own timeline and attention, and it can't be commoditized too soon.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I think that, even yesterday I was doing my first in-person book event, and, we're talking about my book. These people have never even, held my book before. And then when somebody was like, so what's next? What are you doing next? And I was like, which is like a fair question, but, and, she was curious, but it's like, I don't know. I guess I'm supposed to have an answer to that. It's like, no, maybe not. It kind of reminds me too of this isn't exactly a practice, but like something I was just playing with is like, anytime, this is pre-COVID, but anytime someone asks me, how you doing? People often say, oh, I'm so busy. And I practice saying, I'm not busy at all. It's been really great. And I would just start like putting in a good word for not being busy. And it really helped me realize actually how not busy I was, like in that sort of manic, crazy, like I have no time. It helped me understand that I actually had plenty of time. So sometimes these are just things that we say like, okay, well, what's next? And it's like, you don't have to have a good answer, but there's already something. Life is working on you. We're creative creatures. Life is actually working on you, and something is happening beneath the soil.
And that is such a good point, in that what I hear you saying is that when we put expectation on it, so in this case, the expectation would be from this person, maybe, again, nothing wrong with their question.
Yeah.
When's your next book coming out? Or, when's your next retreat or whatever? And when we take those frames or silos or expectations off and just say, I trust that I'm a creative creature.
Right.
And that I'm going to pay attention to what is arising next. So for example, a few episodes ago, I had Sue Monk Kidd on, and one of her favorite things to say is, you need to take your own breath away at least once in your life.
Ooh.
Isn't that great? And she talked about how she took her own breath away for when the idea came for her last book, The Book of Longing, when she envisions Jesus's wife's life. Wow. And by the way, y'all, Jesus's wife is a writer in her envisioning.
I love it.
And she took her own breath away with the audacity of imagining a historical figure that Jesus was married and this was his wife. And so I've set the quiet, faithful intention to take my own breath away with my next idea. But I've also set the intention that it doesn't need to be big, quote marks. It doesn't need to be public.
Yeah.
It may be, but it may not be. And I think what you're speaking to is how, and I hear this theme over and over again in the podcast. We have to be willing to let our creativity go where it's going to go. And that doesn't mean we don't have to say, and I'm going to do this because I have to pay the bills, right? And I'm going to repeat this course or coach these clients or whatever way we earn our bread and pay our mortgage. But there's a faithfulness to that wildness and that freshness that I haven't always kept because I've made a living as a creative for 30 years.
Right. Well, and you're reminding me of one of the questions I have for you, which is like, we are so oriented toward like creating for the market and creating for everybody. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Maybe we need to right size these aspirations. Like you can get into like a why bother if like, if only a few hundred people are going to read it. Right. Like,
oh God, yes.
Should you still bother? Like, right. And what do you say to people with that question?
Yeah. Well, I get this question a lot from writing students and clients. And today I have a nonfiction mastermind. So everyone in it is a woman who is working on some kind of nonfiction project, mostly books. And one woman said, I have had the dream of writing since I was 5 years old.
Mm.
Now I've heard this countless times,
Yeah.
8 years old, middle school, high school, college, whatever.
Mhm.
What violence do we do to ourselves
Mhm.
when we put the marketplace, capitalism, popularity, whatever label it is for you personally listening, ahead of our own soul?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not being a Pollyanna here. I have supported my family for decades. You do too.
Yeah.
We're very practical business people who have to make a certain amount of money to keep
Mm.
things going. But to equate that with I don't have the right, or this is a waste of time,
Right.
that's where I think we mess ourselves up and fall into my
Mhm.
bother.
It makes me long for the olden days of blogging back in 2003 when I was blogging, and I didn't even know how many people were reading because there was no site counter on my website at that time. They were called site counters.
I remember
And
those.
remember those? I didn't even know you could install one. And so I had no idea who I was talking to. There were like 5 people who commented, and I thought, oh, great, there's 5 people reading my blog. And of course, not of course, but like it turns out over those first couple of years, there were thousands of people reading, which I didn't realize. But it was so cozy back then. And it was like, it felt like the time of my life when I was doing mail art, like postal art. And it was this sort of like extension of the Dadaist movement from the 60s or whatever. And we were making really elaborate pieces of art for each other at small scale. And we were sending them in mail to one person, like one person saw it. And that was totally delightful and exciting. And it was this gorgeous exchange. And yeah, just think like this whole Instagram followers, like even my children, they're so wrapped up in that. Well, how many hits, how many, my God, he was probably 7 years old. One of my sons asked my ex-husband, how many hits does Martin Luther King have? Like on his YouTube or something. How many hits does he get? And my husband was like, what? So yeah.
And I want to say something about that, but I want to go back because I didn't really answer your question about ambition as we age.
Yeah, that's a good topic.
It's a good topic and it's a good question. I think our ambition does change because we know the cost of pursuing our dreams. And so we don't know. When I wrote my first book and I was 27.
Wow.
I didn't know what it was going to do for me. I didn't know what it was going to take to get it out there. I didn't know the pleasures and joys or the disappointments. But we know that now, and it is the price of wisdom.
Yeah. Also, I will add that often our dreams, even if they're come from a very authentic place in us, we also are like, I want to prove myself. I want to show how smart I am. I want to show that I have a voice and like I matter. Like there are those things too that we're doing. And as we age, we're like, yeah, so I'm not really into that anymore. I'm kind of good, right?
But you say something very important there, Andrea, which is that I think those are developmental milestones. And when I see people not pursue those developmental milestones, it doesn't matter whether they're successful or not.
Yeah.
But they go into the arena and they fight for what matters to them, whether it's the corporate ladder or getting a book published or a certain amount of revenue in your business or art gallery represents you, or, you try for that show on Broadway. Yeah. We put ourselves out there and that's where we learn and grow. And what I worry is especially for people who identify as women who don't have the support or the encouragement to do that, because I know that I have become a different person because I kept putting myself out there, whether it worked or not, whether anybody saw it.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying. So you're saying, if I understand you correctly, that it's actually a developmental phase or developmental milestone that we actually need to pursue, like where we are sort of proving ourselves in the world, and who we become in the pursuit of that thing, how braver we become, how much more confident, like whatever those gifts are that we cultivate. That's the point.
That's the point.
I love that.
That's the point. And
yeah.
The wins are nice. I mean, they really are, but they don't last.
Mm.
I mean, they don't, I mean, and I'm saying that having built a lot of things on some wins, but that's not what changed me, I don't think. I actually think the failures have changed me more, and the embarrassments and the humiliations, of which there have been many, more than the wins, I would say. But that might be my negativity bias speaking. I mean,
would you be willing to give us an example of one of those?
getting on Oprah and flubbing spectacularly.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, God. You know, all people remember is, oh, she was on Oprah.
That's
but if
great.
if you ever see the interview, you're like, God, that wasn't a very good interview. You look nervous as hell. You were wearing a borrowed suit because I thought I should look a certain way.
Oh,
and
so sweet.
I got kind of pissy with Oprah because I thought I thought the segment that they had me on for was kind of stupid. And yeah, I mean, just that would be a spectacular humiliation.
Wow.
And I didn't realize I quite flubbed the way I had. So I had almost every human I knew watch it when it premiered with me. And when it was over, when my segment was over, there was this moment of dead silence in the living room.
Really? So it wasn't just your perception?
No. Years later, I hired someone for media training for another book tour, and we all watched, and they're like, yeah, that wasn't great.
Oh my God, thank you for sharing that. We can all relate. And you were so brave because you put yourself out there like at the highest level. Like, wow, what an awesome opportunity. And how brave were you to show up for that? I probably would have had a panic attack and like been in the toilet or something like before that show.
I think I was.
Oh my God. Yeah.
One last thing about aging and ambition. I do think you're very right that the things that motivated us before have changed. And so then we go back to where we were with our why bother conversation. Where is the desire now? And are we willing to be beginners and have a beginner's mind with it? Are we willing to have it take different forms?
Yeah.
And are we willing to be patient enough to listen? And these are the questions I'm asking myself right now. Like, am I willing to be patient enough? Am I willing to disappoint people too? Yeah. If we change forms or we change how we work with people.
Yeah. A couple of things that come up for me when you say that. One is just this idea of desire in general and desire in women and this relationship that we have to our desires, because we are conditioned and trained to track other people's wants and needs before our own. So sometimes our desires don't really make it online. They don't really get in front of us. And we're like, well, what do you want? And we're like, freeze. I have no idea what I want. Right? Like even that question yesterday was like, you know, what are you doing next? I was like, I don't know. I guess I'm supposed to have something next. Right. And, so I just want to name that, like, sometimes it takes some work for us to understand what our desires are.
Always. It's an ongoing dialogue. It's never fixed.
Yeah.
It's never fixed. I mean, sometimes I have a hard time telling my husband what I want.
Yeah.
This man that loves me unconditionally and entirely.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have a hard time telling the cab driver, roll up the window.
Yeah. Right. And then when we're even sitting down and being like, okay, I'm going to write my Mondo Biondo list, for example, from that class I used to teach. And it's like, okay, well, what do I want? And it's like, first of all, like the first thing that's in the way is, well, that's not practical. So it's like, okay, well, what's practical? Right. And then it's like, oh, well, you'll never get that. You're too old. And it's like, okay, that's not realistic. So like, there's all these little doors that sort of slam in front of you. And then suddenly you're in this room full of doors that have slammed. And you're like, I don't know what I want anymore. And it's like, no.
It's a great image.
Right. And you just have lots of stuff in the way. And so I love asking people like kind of backdoor questions. If we're using the door metaphor, it's like, what do you secretly want? I like whispering to people like, what do you secretly want? And they're like, I want to quit everything and float in the water, like in a beautiful place, like whatever it is. Like, that's a great way to just start opening up. Like, what do you need? What are you hungry for? Some people are just hungry to rest. right?
And we do so quickly override those desires. And I think when we do, that's why we fall into why bother.
Yeah.
Because there's a part of us that just gives up. And I think that part of us is sort of the conduit between what we might call our soul, or the thread that runs through our lives, or our energy, meaning, purpose. I don't know if it matters what we call it, but that connection has to be open, and it doesn't matter if we can get it exactly. So for example, I have had a desire for months, and well, now it's probably been a year and a half, to be near the ocean again. I've always lived near the ocean. I live in Colorado now. It's very dry here.
Yeah, it
Very
is.
dry. You spend a lot of time here too. And every time it was like, where do you want to go? I want to go to the ocean. Let's go to the ocean. But the pandemic, that made it really difficult. And, and so I kept saying no to it. I kept saying, no, that's okay. We don't need to go. And finally, my sweet, dear daughter has had her heart broken. And she came for a mommy visit right after it happened. And we hatched the idea to go to Hawaii in May.
Oh
my
gosh, yes.
And I was just like, I'm all in on this desire. I'm all in. And all of this stuff came up after the fact. I can't believe you're going to spend so much money and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I'm going to listen to that desire to be near the water.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I think there's a lot of life force in our desire. And when we are cutting our desire off, I mean, one of my big threads of my life story is like cutting off my sexual desire for many years. And what happens to your system at large when you cut off that part of yourself, when you cleave that off, you actually cleave off a lot of your aliveness. And getting that back online was a very big opening for me, a big life-changing experience. And so I know that I think there's something in the culture that it's like, it's good to put other people first. It's good to not want much. No, I don't need anything, to be low maintenance or whatever. And I'm kind of practicing like, what if I was high maintenance? What if I had a lot of needs? What if I was really needy? Like all these things that are very transgressive to be as a woman. I'm like, what if, right? What if I was really hungry all the time, right?
I love that. Heather Harvalowski said in her interview, I want to be ravenous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's one thing to know it and own it. And it's another thing I was just traveling back from Moab from that race with some friends, and they're all about being low maintenance, right? So it's one thing for me to go, wow, this is what I really want. But you know what? I'm not going to ask for it. Yeah. Driving in their car. I don't, but I know it. And they're, I want to stop and eat there.
Right.
Whatever. Yeah, I love that. And I think desire and creativity and creating out loud are so intimately related.
They are. What's inspiring you lately, Jen?
Oh, I was just going to ask you the same question. That's
you were? We had a little mind meld. I got you first. Tell me.
What's inspiring me? I became a runner late in life. I was almost 54. I'm 59 now. And I really fell in love with it. I fell in love with the toughness of it. I fell in love with trail running. My husband fell in love with it. We were doing it together. And then I really lost my love for it. In the last couple of years, a lot of that was the pandemic. It was just something I did, for mood maintenance,
right?
For brain maintenance. And then I started to kind of fall in love with it again the last month. And that's very interesting to me, this idea of how do we stay fresh with the things that we're still doing in our life? How do we stay out of that rote? I'm doing this. Why am I doing this? How does it make me feel? So that's inspiring me. Verbs are inspiring me.
Verbs?
Verbs.
Oh, verbs.
Verbs.
Tell me about the verbs and the verbs.
Playing with another level of craft in my writing, nice. and not just being in that efficiency mode. If I've got to write a newsletter this week, trying to find the joy and the pleasure of the craft of writing again.
Love it.
Getting dressed is kind of inspiring me again after wearing the same sweatpants, which I do have on right now.
I hear you.
But like I led an
Yeah.
in-person event at the end of last year for the first time. And I like got so excited about planning my outfits I was
Oh
going to wear.
my God. That's so fun.
Whoa, what's inspiring you?
Yeah. Well, one thing I just want to say is that a part of wonder is novelty. Like one way into wonder is novelty. When you go somewhere new, for example, or you see something new, even in a new restaurant, it's kind of exciting, right? There's a kind of wonder that we can find. So even planning new outfits, having new clothes, going on a new trail that you've never gone on before, can help like wake us up again, right?
Yes.
To what we
And,
love.
and that's I feel like the word for me right now is reemergence,
Mm,
and really inspiring myself to reemerge and not just fall back onto the couch and the Netflix,
mm,
but to make that effort to go see those new things and really see them, like
yeah.
doing that run, even though I'd done that course before, and really like, I kept looking up and out and up and out.
Mm,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And what's inspiring you?
Yeah, so a couple things are inspiring me. One is in the realm of body moving my body, Zumba. I didn't know Zumba was so fun. It's super fun.
It's super fun.
Yeah, so I've been really enjoying that, and humbled by how aerobic it is and how these women who are all like mostly like 20 years older than me are just like rocking it out. And I'm really tired and they're not. I'm like, wow, okay, I want to be like you. So that's fun. Another thing is this book called Unbound by Kasia Urbaniak. Have you heard of this book?
Mm-mm.
She is a Taoist nun and a dominatrix. And so she is talking about women and their power in this really interesting way. She has this very sophisticated understanding of women and their power and how the conditioning has impacted our voice and our ability to be people of influence in the world. And women should be of influence in the world in a big way. And it is kind of exploding my brain. I've listened to it twice now, and it's just helping me understand like the stuff that gets in the way of me just having a powerful desire. There's a lot about desire in there, and then making requests and saying no, and all the things that sound very ordinary, but getting in a real energetic alignment around my own worthiness and my own voice, so that when I so that I am living in a more powerful kind of congruent way with like my being. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm loving it.
Cool. One
Yeah.
of the things I always wanted to ask you is, it feels to me, and this may be complete social media projection, that you go exploring a lot, that you make time to go out with your camera and go out for wonder walks and so many of the other ideas in the book, Wonder Seeker. How do you make time for that and manage your business and making enough money and your boys?
Yeah. I was chatting with, I lead circles of women throughout the week. And one of the things we talk about is like, gosh, you remember in your 20s when you would just wander, like you'd go to a city and you'd be by yourself and you would just wander around the city. And gosh, we don't get to wander anymore, right? Like we have families and like we're trying to make these like vacations work, all that kind of stuff. And so I think just those simple walks with my camera, like I described earlier, are one way that I just like, I wander. There's these hidden staircases all over the Bay Area. And I have these books where it's like, okay, I'm going to go on a hidden staircase walk today in a new neighborhood. So stuff like that. Nothing like super outrageous, really. But again, the novelty thing, it's like, get off, just get off the beaten path a little bit. Like, okay, like what's a trail I've never gone to? What's a restaurant I've never seen? Let's walk around that. Like, let's go to a drive-in movie, like whatever it is. But just being a little bit playful. And I mean, I don't think I have like a really abnormally interesting life, but I am very easily delighted by the world. And I think that's one of the things I'm trying to teach in my book is like, you don't have to go to Hawaii or Machu Picchu or whatever to experience wonder.
Yeah.
It's really a state of mind, and it's a kind of attention that we can put on very ordinary things that are right in front of us.
I love that. So
Yeah.
I always have a last question. I don't know if you have a last question you ask your guests, but my last question is always, what do you want to learn next?
What I want to learn is about crows. I've been noticing crows a lot lately. They've just been really getting my attention. And I've always heard like, oh, they're really smart, or oh, they have this really sophisticated way that they move in the world. And so I want to learn about crows. It's very random. There's no purpose to it, but I'm curious about it.
But learning things we're curious about is the theme of this conversation. So
Yes.
it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah. And I kind of love that it has no purpose, right? Like
And
there's
we
no good
need
reason.
so much more of that. So because wonder doesn't have a purpose. If it has a purpose, then
Right.
you kill it before it can make you wonder.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. One of the questions that I used to ask my podcast guests, and you're reminding me, I haven't asked it in a long time, is like, what are some of your superpowers?
Oh, from your superpower work. I love that.
Yeah.
I think my superpower has always been tenacity.
Yeah.
Not been the smartest person in the room or the sharpest tool in the shed or whatever,
Uh-huh.
but I'm stubborn and tenacious. But I think I want to develop a new superpower as I turn towards the big 6-0 later this year.
Ooh.
And I don't know what it would be, Andrea. Maybe the superpower of, and maybe being ravenous. I'll
Ooh.
borrow that from Heather. Not sure. Maybe it
Yeah.
may be listening. It may be something about, I feel like something about being a little bit more fully expressed or outrageous.
Yeah, but it's got a big energy to it. It's got freedom. Has wildness. I feel it. I like feel what you're reaching for. I like that. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. This has
Thank
been
you.
so fun.
Love catching up, and everybody pick up a copy of Wonder Seeker, 52 Ways to Wake Up Your Creativity and Find Your Joy, and pair it with Why Bother? Discover the Desire for What's Next, and you will be unstoppable, unbound, whatever word we want.
I love it. And I love just those two questions are great to leave the listeners with as well. It's like, what do you want to learn that's like practical or not? What do you feel curious about? And what's a superpower you either have or want to cultivate? I love it. I think the one I want to cultivate right now is being someone who is capable of the most, like, I want to say extravagantly joyful partnership, like a lover, like the best lover. That's my new superpower.
Yum. Thank you so much, Andrea. It was
Thank
great to spend time with
you.
you.